go ahead and get started. I'm stepping in for the wonderful Dr. Romero, who couldn't be here today because of travel, so I'm going to try and fill his shoes. On behalf of the Francis McClellan Institute, I'd like to thank everyone for coming here to the talk today, and the director of the program would like to say a few words before we get started.
So just welcome Dan McDonald, the interim director, of the Norton School. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be able to host these events, and we're really thankful to the Francis McClellan Institute, which is actually the institute that organizes these speakers every year, and so, occasionally, not every year, it's like once a month, right? Like that. And so we're very fortunate because Francis McClellan is someone who donated money to support the Institute a number of years ago, and we use that endowment to help support not just the speaker series, but research that goes on around campus, and then also outreach into the community. So we're really glad that we have the Institute and that we're able to put this on, and we're very eager to be here.
As Dr. McDonald briefly highlighted, again, thank you to Francis McClellan. The research that we do here at the Institute is dedicated to improving the lives of children, youth, and families, and I think that you'll see that come through via the speaker series. And a specific thank you to Hamlet Turberville, whose endowment sponsors this entire speaker series, who is an alumna of this program and a recipient of the CALS Achievement Award in 2000. And to get started speaking today, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ashley Randall, is an associate professor at Arizona State University in the Department of Counseling and Counseling Psychology, where she's the director of clinical training there. She's actually an alumni of this program at FSHD, graduating in 2012. And her research focuses on couple stress and interpersonal emotion regulations and the implications for emotional well-being on the individual and relational level. So on behalf of FMI, I'd like to thank you and welcome.
One quick, this shirt is green, this one's black, so I want you to know that was up.
You were concerned about that.
I wanted to make sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invite. And it's quite nostalgic to be back here and to be seeing familiar faces, friends that went to grad school together, certainly advisors and mentors. And really the last time that I was in this room was defending my dissertation, so there's probably some PTSD anxiety that's coming up. However, hopefully it'll be a little bit less traumatic. Well, it wasn't traumatic, so for those of you that are in the process. I was just glad to be done with that part. So I am super, super excited to be here. It's wonderful to see familiar faces, new faces. My hope is that this will be a very engaging talk, and I want you to participate and ask questions and, be as excited as I am to present this work to you. One of the things I should note, and probably Dr. Toomey would also recognize, is that for those of you that are in this program, I understand that grad school is stressful, but you are getting phenomenal, phenomenal training. And note that when you are past that comps phase, past the dissertation phase, and you can reflect on the immense coursework and everything like that, know that it's all well worth it. And I was not even paid to say that. That is my own. So today I'm here to talk to you about some of the work that I've been doing, and I want to acknowledge Casey Copenhagen. Casey is actually another graduate of this program. Ironically enough, Casey and I shared cubicle space similarly downstairs on the third floor. Never actually collaborated until we decided to. We were getting our faculty jobs and thought, wouldn't it be a great idea prior to starting our faculty jobs to write a grant, because there's nothing else that we had to prepare for, obviously, in starting our first job. And so we've been very fortunate to receive funding, and so I want to acknowledge her in this work because it's very much of a joint collaborative effort of what I'm presenting. So here that you probably maybe can see, cannot see some words, that this is really a reflection of what it is that we study. and that I study predominantly. So it's looking at how stress operates in the context of close relationships. And I want to take you on a little bit of a historical road, not so historical, but a little bit of a historical road of how we got here to understand and do the work that we're doing. So this actually starts with some work that I did prior to coming here at the University of Arizona for my PhD, and that is really understanding how can we conceptualize stress in the context of close relationships. So if I ask you all, and some of you that are doing clinical work, if you say, well, I had a client who's coming in that's stressed, I had a friend that's telling me who's stressed, those can mean various contexts of things, right? You can either talk physiologically, negative emotion, affect, etc. However, in thinking about it from a relational context, what does stress mean? And so prior to coming to the U of A, we did, my colleague Guy Bodeman, who's at the University of Zurich in Switzerland, worked together to really conceptualize a typology of stress in close relationships. Now, if you're not already excited and super paying attention, you really need to pay attention because there's going to be a game on the next slide. Okay. Well, yeah, don't get too excited. There's no prizes. So one of the things that we thought about was, well, how can we conceptualize stress in the context of close relationships? And we did so on 3 varying dimensions. So one is, where does stress come from? Okay, what is the locus of stress? Does stress originate outside the relationship, being those external stressors? So for example, I know none of you have had a stressful day at work, or none of you have had a stressful day from a class, I know, right? Just thinking hypothetically. Like humor, but different. Okay, don't worry. So then there's also internal stressors, right? Where it's like you're having differing goals from your partner. Of, you know what, I can really see us having children. Well, I can't, right? I could see us really moving here. I'm not really sure about that. So there's a difference in terms of external stressors versus these internal stressors. Then the intensity of the stress. Are these stresses macro in nature, so they really have a larger impact on the relationship and on the system? So for example, experiencing a chronic illness, maybe unemployment, death of a family member, or are they relatively minor? Such as having a bad day, to use that as an example again. And then also the duration of stress. Are these stressors that you experience within a daily context or a weekly context that seemingly then fade away, or do they actually last over a long period of time? And how we measure this conceptually and operationally is acute, tending to be within the past week. Chronic is actually within the past year. So everyone's on the same page, right? We understand the locus, the duration, and the intensity. Because now I'm going to ask you, and this is where your participation comes in, is that based on, and these are a couple of review articles that Key and I did, so one is from 2009, and then we did an update for 2017, and I will actually talk about areas for expansion there. However, where do you think the locus of stress is that's worse for relationship outcomes? Is it these external stressors that we experience? So having a bad day at work, maybe having an argument with one's partner? Which is worse? How many of you say it's the internal stressors? If I am having a really? Okay, so if I am having a bad day, so don't worry about Dr. Butler. You just focus up here. Okay.
We think it's external. We
No,
can't
you
do
can-
anything about it. Is that right?
Okay, well, all right, don't worry. You all are going to participate in the next one. Yes, it's external stressors. Okay, so for those of you that picked internal the first time, thank you for playing. There's still 2 more rounds. Okay, what about the intensity of stress? Macro, so chronic illness, unemployment, death of a family member, are relatively minor.
Are we voting?
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah, that would be it. So, major stressors. Unemployment, death of a spouse, chronic illness. A couple of you? Okay. For those of you that have selected major, thank you so much for playing. You still have 1 more round, okay? So far we know the the stressors that have the largest detriment on relationship satisfaction, relationship quality, and stability over time so far are external and minor. Now, what about the duration? Chronic or acute?
How much are we? What's the time frame that you're measuring the other outcome?
Excellent question. Not part of the game. Touche. Very good point. Acute? Excellent. Very good. Now, this is a very smart audience. So, and not saying that I present this information to other non-intelligible audiences. However, a lot of the times, I think some of the things that we think about when we think about stress in the context of relationships are not things that are happening outside the relationship that can really spill over into the relationship, causing relational stress. So when we come home consistently having a bad day, or having a stressful experience at work, or having stressful interactions, and we are continuously sharing these experiences with our partners, over time it kind of erodes, like rust, you know, on a sink.
I have a question.
Yes?
What about the accumulation of stressors? Where does that fit in this model? Like, you know, you've had a bad day, your mother's dying, you just got hit by a car, you know, that accumulation of stress, not...
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. And I think that at the most basic value, this is a very simple categorization of, and I will then speak to a little bit future point of the measurement, is that I don't know that methodologically and measurement speaking we're there yet to then combine kind of these aggregate levels of stress. Yeah, they're typically just kind of looked at in a single format.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you, John. All right. So knowing kind of this typology and keeping this framework in mind is that one of the questions is, how do experiences of stress impact partners in a romantic relationship? Now, I'm a visual person, so this is actually a visual. Maybe Dr. Butler remembers this, and maybe Dr. Taylor, because this is a visual that I have semi-upgraded since my dissertation proposal. So at least you know that the train of thought has continued since graduation. However, this is my example of my artistic ability. Did you know that this is actually two individuals? You had no idea, right? Abstract art. So here we have two individuals where one is experiencing stress. What we know from research is that stress can cross over to one partner, causing stress within the other. Some of the other work, specifically that Dr. Butler and I have done together, is looking at the coordination of negative emotions and or positive emotions, and then subsequently how that has impacted both physical and mental health outcomes. The reason why I show you this as a visual context is that thinking about, again, that external stress and how stress can impact relationships. Now, I had mentioned to you that in those 2009 and the 2017 review article, we were very much looking at external stressors, which I will say with a very heteronormative focus, which is the impetus for a lot of the work that I'm currently doing now, is not recognizing that there are additional stressors that minority individuals may experience that are above and beyond, quote unquote, what Casey and I would term as common stressors or everyday stressors. And so in this context, we're defining minority couples as same-sex or same-gender couples. However, these can also be stressors that are experienced with interfaith couples, interethnic couples, etc. So hopefully this provides a little bit more of a visualization of how stress is really considered as more of an interdependent framework than more of an interpersonal framework. So with that in mind in the background is that one of the things that we actually started out doing when Casey and I thought it was a great idea to apply for a grant as we were moving to our respective locations is that how can we think about and how can we conceptualize stress in the context of relationships for sexual minority individuals? And so we did so, and kind of in this project, looked at it in a three-pronged approach. So the first question that we had is that how do enduring vulnerabilities such as internalized homophobia impact experiences of stress? Now, being theoretically trained to always have a theory, Dr. Kerman, thank you, 546, ingrained in my brain, is that we start vulnerability-stress-adaptation model. This is Carney and Bradbury's work. And their thought was that there are enduring vulnerabilities that some individuals may have and may be predisposed to as individual traits that may make them more susceptible to experiencing stress, which over time then leads to kind of a deterioration in marital quality, which over time leads to a deterioration in marital stability. Traditionally, and historically speaking, applications of this model have looked at either individual personality traits, so individuals that are high in neuroticism, maybe low in openness, and a lot of Ben's work has expanded it to look at couples who are in low socioeconomic environments. However, there has been a lack of application to this point of understanding how there may be additional enduring vulnerabilities that individuals may experience. And so our thought here was very much about, well, what are maybe potential enduring vulnerabilities that sexual minority couples may experience? Thinking about internalized homophobia, negative internal feelings about one's sexual orientation, and or low in openness, right? So not being, just disclosing one's sexual orientation to those that are close to them. So with that in mind, to start looking and analyzing this question, I'm going to go through a little bit of the study background information, which is going to be similar for the subsequent research that I'm presenting. So I'm only going to present the recruitment and the kind of the study demographics one. It's a bit similar for the other study. So Casey and I started out, and Casey's at the University of Alabama. I'm at the other school up in Phoenix, University of Arizona. I feel like I have to say that in the audience. And so we thought, looking at potential population differences or context differences, this would be really interesting to look at. Teaser alert, there is absolutely no difference between the environments between Phoenix and Alabama, which was surprising to us. Definitely not surprising to the NIH program officer that said, I'm sorry, what was the supportive environment that you're collecting data from? So that was a very good conversation. However, so in terms of recruitment, we collected community samples of committed same-sex couples, and I want to take a moment to be mindful of the language that we have used here. And so we purposely, in this sample, collected individuals who reported on their sex. We have since, in future studies, expanded to self-identified gender and gender expression. So we distributed flyers nationally, so we were not necessarily nationally within our specific organization, within our specific areas. So in Phoenix, we recruited through different LGBT, organizations, community listservs, etc., and same within Alabama. We actually had to expand a little bit outside the Tuscaloosa area into Birmingham, given the amount of couples that we were getting to participate. Our inclusion criteria for this study was that both had to be adults, so legal age in Arizona, 18, legal age of 19 in Alabama, had to be in a same-sex romantic relationship together for at least 2 months to at least establish some type of baseline interdependence. And this study actually included an online survey where they did a baseline survey and then a 14-day daily diary so that we could actually track processes of stress and coping over time. We were fortunate to have 95 couples that actually participated in this wave of data. So that's 95 couples that are across both the baseline and the 14-daily diary. We have some additional work that has looked at stress crossover and spillover within the daily diaries. Out of the 95 same-sex couples, we actually have 81 that have completed both the baseline and at least 3 days of the daily diary. However, still, an arguably good sample size. And you can see that we had roughly the same amount of couples from our different populations. Quite an age variance, 18 to 61. And then, however, to note is that, in looking at future questions of intersectionality, we have here predominantly female-identified same-sex couples and also predominantly Caucasian couples. So areas for future research and how to, outsource and to get other populations. So before I show you the visual, so the question here again was, how does internalized homophobia act as a potential enduring vulnerability for same-sex couples? With our outcomes in terms of how do we measure that marital quality, we actually looked at conflict and the degree of arguments. So here is what our results show. Hopefully this comes up. So here our first hypothesis was that how does daily stress impact reports of conflict? Well, what we have here, we found a significant interaction that on days when individuals experienced high daily stress, they also, they reported high internalized homophobia. They also reported increased conflict. Okay, so somewhat already of a support of conflict being that outcome of stability. And so then of quality. Then what do we see here? Similarly, we find a decrease in relationship quality for individuals who report high internalized homophobia. So what we are showing is that in this context, across the daily variation, we are seeing evidence for expanding the vulnerability-stress-adaptation model to understand how enduring vulnerabilities, and at least the definition of how it's currently been applied, can really be expanded to understand some contextual variances that may be specific to minority couples. Questions as I take a quick sip of water? Okay, continue marinating on those amazing questions. So I'm going to switch gears because I don't want to leave you all on a Friday afternoon before Thanksgiving with, the doom and gloom of stress really affects relationship. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
So you said with the participants, how did you put again in consideration their same sex and how they identify?
Excellent question. So what we had done is, so the screening criterion was that one participant had emailed, they completed a screening survey where they self-identified their sex as we had female, male, transgender, and other. And then following that, we sent the survey to their partner, and then assuming that they were matched in terms of their self-identified sex, then we
How did you take that then in consideration the transgender?
So interestingly, we had one couple in the data set, which we subsequently removed from the analyses, that identified as transgender. And it's unfortunate, and we're much more mindful in our future work of being inclusive, and that's what I meant in terms of our definition of same sex, and not using that as a legal biological sex, but more so of gender expression and gender identity in the future work. Because I do think that limited some of the conclusions that we came up with.
Is there a scale of internalized homophobia? I just don't know that construct. Is
Yes.
there a standardized scale for that?
Standardized scale, yes, yep, standardized scale that we used, John Moore, I believe, do you know Bryce? Yeah, John Moore's scale of internalized homophobia, absolutely. Yes.
What was the conversation status? Are they living together, or they don't need to be living together?
Didn't have to be living together in a relationship for at least 2 months. The majority of individuals were living together, and then we had a significant bimodal distribution, really, of individuals that were early in their relationship and clarified. Okay, so back to my idea that I don't want to leave you with doom and gloom and stress affects relationships and all is lost. Because guess what? You can actually work with your partner to combat some of these negative experiences of stress, which is really kind of where the other arm of my research comes in, is that how do we either help our partners or in a therapeutic context, how can we teach couples to really have these preventative effects of not allowing this stress to have a detrimental effect on our relationship? So let me introduce to you the concept of dyadic coping. First, if this is of interest to you, and we looked at it across cultural sample, this is an edited book with my colleague Mariana and he that came out in 2016. This is actually a book that includes 13 different nations from across the world of how couples in those in those cultures cope with stress. What are the associations with dyadic coping? Now, here is like where it's going to be a little bit of a roadmap. Is that if you think about couples coping, I think often individuals think about, okay, well, I offer social support to my partner, or we both cope with something, and I cope and they cope, so together we are good copers. Okay, so let me take a step back. In terms of, there's a lot of different theoretical orientations to understanding dyadic coping, and the one that we primarily work from in our lab is the systemic-transactional model. So for those of you that are systems thinkers, like this is so up your alley because it really subsumes that we are interdependent with our romantic partner. My stress experience is your stress experience, it's our stress experience, it's something that we have to deal with together. As a quick aside, we were trying to work on a Venus scale in my first year at ASU, and my graduate student said, Dr. Randall, I do have a quick question. And I said, yeah, and she goes, why are we studying elbow skin? And I was like, excuse me? Did you know that the elbow skin, or the skin on your elbow is called Venus? I had no idea, but that's not what I'm talking about, right? So it's like we cope with stress, and I'm like, yeah. So ideally, so going back, is that, so from a systemic, transactional perspective, is that we're coping with stress together. And so that's where this idea of dyadic coping comes from, and that's the theoretical lens that I'm going to be applying throughout this talk. Now, dyadic coping, I think implicitly, at least for those of us that are in the positive relationship realm of things, is that we think of dyadic coping as something that is positive. Okay? Yes, we're coping with our partners, this is great. And that's certainly one arm of this. However, the other arm is that we can actually negatively cope with our partners. If our partner comes home and says, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what so-and-so did today. Our response might be like, oh, here we go again, heard about this story before, same thing, different day, right? I see some recognition smiles and some laughter, but I will not call you out. However, we can also reluctantly cope with our partner. Fine, I will go pick up, whatever it may be. I'll go pick up dinner, no problem. I'll, pick up, our child from whatever extracurricular activities, fine. But then it ultimately kind of erodes your own relationship quality as well. However, Casey and I try to focus on more of the positive aspects of things and the ways in which partners actually positively respond to coping with their partner. And so based on this model, we look at both problem-focused and emotion-focused coping. Problem-focused coping being that where we can actually help our problem solve to say, well, have you tried this? Are these aspects that you've maybe tried in trying to resolve this? Whereas emotion-focused coping is very similar to providing empathy or emotional support for one's partner. So again, the crux is thinking about, okay, well, we know that couples, specifically sexual minority couples, experience stress. We know that they experience stress in the context of their relationship, and they have enduring vulnerabilities that may exacerbate some of these stressors. So how is it that they potentially may use some of these techniques to then apply that? Now, one of the first questions that we actually looked at, and this is a standardized scale, looking at different sexual minority stressors. And so these actually respond to, or individuals respond to in a self-report manner, of different aspects of sexual minority stress. Discrimination at work, harassment from other individuals, lack of family support, and running the gamut. And so one of the things that we were first interested in looking at was that, well, in a work context, how may experiences and reports of work discrimination, how may that then negatively affect one's own individual well-being? Here we're looking at depression or symptoms of anxiety, and then how then can partners coping actually maybe mitigate some of these associations? Now I'm being mindful to use the term associations and not necessarily effects, because this is actually data that we analyzed from the baseline. But let me take you here. So this is a map of the United States. Hopefully we're all on page with that. And I've actually helped you out, because I know it's a Friday afternoon, to identify where Arizona and Alabama are on the map. Okay, so at least you know the context to which we are looking at. And so what you can see here is that for the orange states, these are states that, at least this is data from 2013, which is reflective of when we collected this data, of states that did not prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity for all employees. So states in which these individuals in their work context, may be unprotected, or were unprotected rather. And so we asked individuals to report how much discrimination, particularly work discrimination, are you experiencing due to your sexual minority status, and then how does that then, how is that then associated with your symptoms of anxiety? So I will say that the first hypothesis of the association between discrimination, stress, and symptoms of anxiety was positive. That's not anything new necessarily. It's that it was kind of supported in our data. However, we did then want to look at dyadic coping. And so here is where the results are a little bit interesting. And then I would say, of course, gathering additional data above 95 couples, gathering and using methods of longitudinal analysis would be great to look at these effects over time. So keep in mind that these are cross-sectional results here. Is that what we find is that there's really reported increased symptoms of anxiety when we don't think that our partner is engaging in this problem-focused coping, okay, or they at least are low on this coping. Interestingly, we didn't see any significant effects for when I say, yes, I do believe that my partner actually helps me kind of problem solve some of these things. However, it's that when my partner doesn't do these things, we're kind of seeing some of this. Similarly, for emotion-focused coping. Now, keeping in mind that one of the things that Casey and I often talk about is that it's wonderful for the couples who have participated in this study that they actually show quite high relationship satisfaction. They tend to, exhibit low stress, high coping. Wonderful for the couples, horrible for trying to publish articles when you're talking about, yes, we examine stress and we have very low variance in our stress measure. And so keep these, ideas in mind as I'm presenting some of these results to you. But certainly, some of this work has shown that greater work discrimination stress, not surprisingly, is associated with greater anxiety. However, these associations are greater under conditions of low partner supported dyadic coping. Okay, I'm kind of dealing with this on my own. I don't feel as though that my partner is a support in this context. We've actually shown very similar results in terms of looking at stress experience due to family discrimination, symptoms of depression, etc. However, really going for more of like the positive effects and some of the other things that we've looked at it and trying to do with this data is looking at how it is that we can expand our understanding of what are stressors that are experienced by sexual minority couples, in what context are these stressors experienced, what associations do outness, for example, play. So does it matter in certain contexts if I am out to family or if I am out to my chosen family, my biological family, my chosen family, my friends, etc. So we're really trying to broaden out this understanding of how stress and coping can be related for couples. And so now in terms of future directions, one of the things that Casey and I have done is actually taken this work as a real crux to some of our current and future work that we're doing. So one of the things is I think we were overly ambitious to think this was amazing. We collected data from longitudinal data in our minds in 14 days of daily diary. We collected longitudinal data in a semester. Bam! We are research recruitment rock stars. That vision lasted very shortly. So what happened is that, Casey and I were fortunate to receive a grant through GLAMA, the Lesbian Health Fund, to actually look at how female same-sex couples use or female same-gender couples use their romantic partner as a dyadic source of support into the dyadic management of a condition. Now, initially, in kind of looking and being mindful of funding, we thought, well, maybe chronic pain. Now, we are not pain researchers. We're family scientists, and so we were working with individuals of looking at chronic pain in the context of relationships. We were awarded the grant, and recruitment, pun intended, was painful. Okay, really painful. So remember, 95 same-sex couples in one semester. We recruited an entire year nationally. How many couples do you think that we had? 35. 10.
16.
16. I love the optimism. The answer is 1.
Oh!
How can it be? How can it be? I wondered the same thing, Melissa. Lost a lot of sleep. Here's what I think. Thinking from a systemic context, one of the inclusion criteria for that study was that one partner had to be diagnosed with at least a mild or clinically form of chronic pain, not specific to, it didn't have to be migraines, for example, or any type of back pain, where the other partner did not. talk about symptom system fit, right? Is that we were getting tons of recruitment and tons of couples that were participating and wanting to be screened. However, we weren't necessarily seeing the discrepancy. So we went back to the program officer after that first year and we said, we have exhausted. I mean, we're talking, when we created the site for the program officer, I think there were 2,000 sites nationwide that we had tried to recruit from and send our recruitment information from. And so the program officer had suggested, well, first we wanted to be mindful and said, can we open it up to all sexual minority individuals, which understandably so, given the funding agency of the Lesbian Health Fund, they were not necessarily amenable to. They had suggested, well, what about, and perhaps I'm going to twist this a bit based on my memory because I was quite shocked. They said, well, what about where one partner is going to have an amputation? That's when you're glad you're on your iPhone and you're like, mute, what? Okay. Yes, okay, that's a great idea. So then Casey and I thought, okay, we want to do other things in our research, not just this 1 year. So then we actually went back to the drawing board, did a very thorough review, came up with the top 5 diagnoses that were most common among sexual minority individuals, predominantly women. And so we actually have redone the study. It's in kind of year and a half of data collection. So we are currently collecting, do you know of anyone? I want to pass them along. It's good Samaritans. We are actually currently collecting data for female same-sex. It's noted here for a Facebook ad. It's explained in full detail in the consent form and our other recruitment information. Wherein one partner meets the above threshold for clinical symptoms of depression, not necessarily diagnosed, not currently seeking treatment, where the other partner is not. To then really look at that dyadic management of care. And how does one partner's symptoms of depression affect their other partner's perception of care, quality of the relationship, their own depressive symptoms, etc. Happy to chat more about kind of, some tidbits about recruitment information. However, for those of you that are getting ready to do recruitment, if you have not heard of Research Match, it is a phenomenal free resource that gives you access to thousands and thousands of individuals across the U.S. So if you need them to come into a lab, probably not a great idea. However, you can actually input your recruitment information. The company sends you an email to say, here are the individuals that match your recruitment information, and then you can send out an email regarding.
For excluded couples and families or just individuals?
Yep, so it recruits individuals, but then you can actually write back, to say, I'm interested, we're doing dyadic data. Yeah.
How much is it?
Great. It's free.
Really?
Yeah. Don't all join at once because then it won't be free. So maybe Saturday, right? Like I'll do it Thursday, I'll do it next Tuesday. It's a free service. It's actually quite great. So that's a current study that we are currently ongoing with data collection. Our hope is to be wrapped up by the end of this academic year. And then certainly this is kind of building on more of the relational processes, the longitudinal analyses, and then we are currently in the midst of applying and preparing an R21. And so looking at some of the dyadic coping work that we've done together, and then primarily kind of from my background, is recognizing that in terms of trying to sift through the literature of therapeutic interventions, and more so psychoeducational offerings for same-sex individuals, or sexual minority individuals, that really target the understanding of stress and the types of stress are non-existent. And then offering specific techniques. And so we are currently kind of creating our PRISM program, which will be modeled largely off of Guy Bodeman's couples coping enhancement training, which has only been delivered in Europe. And so we have since translated that material. We are currently revising that material, and so that will be something that we're hoping to implement. So with that, I want to acknowledge this is how cool Casey and I are at conferences. This is cute. We're like cool people, but probably not as cool as this picture. In terms of, this is us at the GLAMO conference just recently presenting our work, which is actually preliminary data based on some of the information I've presented to you. I want to acknowledge certainly the NCFR's Innovation Grant, which is the grant that currently funded our prior work that I was mentioning to you about the stressors. Certainly our research participants, without them we couldn't do the work, and then our research assistants both at ASU and the University of Alabama. in Tuscaloosa, which, by the way, is probably one of the hardest words to write in an email or a Word document. Like Casey Totenhagen, University of Tuberculosis. Doesn't count. That's easy. And with that, thank you so much.
So I thought your talk was really interesting, and I really appreciate what you said about data collection, right? So especially for like our undergrad, and like let's just finish data recruitment, and Savannah's participating. It's like so much work to data recruit, and then like I think it's really important to be aware of that, and then like to like figure out how to like talk to folks and connect, and like because it's sometimes painful. Like you try to like get funding, and then you get funding, but then you can't get participants, and then you have participants, but you can't get funding. Like it's really tricky, you know. So like I think that's important that you share that story versus like it's easy on it, just like up your sample like a couple hundred. Like you can't always do that.
And I will say that I think that, you know, in moving the field of, you know, broadly defined, right, moving the field of psychological science beyond the traditional undergraduate sample population, we have people come to the lab for credit, and this is what we know about relationships. We know that 100% it's not generalizable. And I don't know many couples that are sitting around on a Saturday saying, I mean, thankfully they did for the work that Emily and I did, because otherwise I wouldn't be here without my dissertation. But I mean, it's challenging of where do we recruit these individuals? What is their, you know, impetus for actually participating? I will say in some of the lab stuff I've done at ASU, I really think they met maybe 15 minutes before they came to the lab, because based on their conversations, it's like, what do you like to do? I don't know, what do you like to do? Like, wow, you guys don't know each other. Or maybe they do, I don't know. And it's hard, and it's hard because I think, one, from a scientific perspective, we need this data in order to move a lot of the fields forward, especially when it comes to intervention and mental health.
But I think it's, again, like, so I heard everything you said, and I think it also is an important point, like when you're reading a textbook or you're reading papers, and you're like, look at all these cisgender, heterosexual white folks, and again, not that they're not a contribution, but they can't be the only folks who are included in science.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I will say that that's something wherein it's like when I'm working with my students and they're citing, oh, well, this is this literature that suggests this. And I say, great, can you also include for me, at least in an initial conversation, include for me the samples that they've actually come up to, you know, or these results are based on. Because if you're talking about, you know, let's just use Tucson for example, right? Like a undergraduate sample of 18 to 22 from Tucson, Arizona, and you're trying to generalize to any type of, you know, other population, it's quite challenging.
Yeah. Okay, and then I have just one more comment.
Yeah.
So then I also think, like, from an editorial perspective, so like for those of us who are, you know, editors and associate editors, then I think it's even more important to publish these smaller studies, whether they're qualitative or like these quantitative studies that seem smaller compared to like hundreds or thousands of participants that we could get. Because then if they're not being published, they're not in the literature at all. You know, so I think like depending on the outlet, I think there's some editors who are a little reluctant to do that. They're like, just have some more people. But like, you can't add more people. It's not that easy.
Agreed, and I think that like particularly, you know, and I'm sure Dr. Cheney has, you know, some thoughts on this as well. I also think too, and being mindful of where, you know, Casey and I recruited from. We thought, well, let's go to LGBT organizations. Let's go to potential community resources. However, that's also a self-selecting sample, right, of individuals who are utilizing those resources or who feel comfortable to utilize resources or even have the ability to use those resources. So whom is it that we are trying to actually, you know, help in our research?
When you say go to, did you actually go attend meetings and talk about it and explain the study at these organizations, or was it all online?
Both.
Both. So you actually went to organizations and actually spoke with the membership?
Yep, spoke with the membership, talked with them. For the other study that I mentioned that is now focused on depression, but was focused on chronic pain, had a lot of conversations with individuals at Mayo Clinic at ASU to try to get in terms of that. However, that's one of those retrospective, probably should have done this prior to kind of proposing this.
Yeah, you know, it's really hard, you know, working with community groups. It just takes so much time to get in.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. Yeah. And then I think too, from a relational perspective, is that we don't, you know, and I'm not meaning to be, you know, say this in jest. However, unless, or at least my perception is that unless couples are in crisis, and I'm not talking imminent crisis, but unless they're in crisis or seeking some type of therapeutic reprieve, how likely are we to get the couples that are?
The healthy.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. That it's like I'm really stressed out, because if I'm stressed, what's the last thing I'm going to want to do? Like, I'm not filling out a daily survey, especially if I don't like my partner.
Well, the encouraging part, if you wanted to study the breakup process, and now there's marriage, so now there's divorce.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
you have divorce records to get to, as a recruitment source and so on.
Yes.
So the participants in the study are filling out surveys at the end of every day. How do you control for like the social desirability bias of just wanting to seem like they have a better relationship than they're actually in?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah.
No, I mean, and I'm not, that's a very good question. And I think that, like, my initial thought is one, to at least, like, you could potentially look at it in terms of the variability in their responding. If I'm reporting this on day 2, am I also similarly kind of reporting this within a standard range, on day 10 or whatever it may be. The one maybe implicit thought is that we encourage them to not complete the surveys with their partners. So at least that hopes that adds some anonymity to that. Did you have thoughts on that though? Because that's a very good question.
I don't have thoughts. I just
Okay.
think that a lot of times, even like with the depressed, if you're in a relationship and you're depressed, is your kind of judgment to that relationship, is it going to be accurate to what's actually happening?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Very good. We do, in this study, we do have, the way that we have framed, at least for the depression study, is that we have 2 versions of the questionnaire. So we have the patient version and then the partner version. The patient, not because they're in treatment, but at least they have exhibited high symptoms of depression. And so, in that context, we can at least look at a little bit of accuracy in terms of reporting of symptoms and behaviors. However, it always defaults to, well, what is really the objective measure? And we're still, introducing subjective bias onto that. Yeah, excellent question.
In relation to this,
Yeah.
is like the concordance between reports and satisfaction or conflict, so you can kind of get an idea of like if maybe there is a mismatch between, so that you get like some kind of desirability, like one person is saying, yeah, we're great, the other person's saying, yeah, no, we're not so great, so like maybe that concordance between, if there's like a mismatch there, you can look at like, okay, well something's going wrong because there's no concordance in the report.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, look at the difference first. Yeah. It's interesting. So, in another quick self-report cross-sectional study that we gave to some of the students, one of the students actually came up to me and said, "Oh, I just want to let you know I filled out your survey." I was like, "Okay, well, don't worry. I don't know which year I'm in because it's de-identified. I don't know where it is." But you really made me talk to my partner about this because he was quite surprised that I answered blah blah blah, and I was like, "Oh, I hope it went well." Yeah, but that's a very good idea.
So thinking about, all of my research is on adolescents, but we're seeing kind of trends in utilization of LGBT resources as decreasing, especially after marriage same-sex marriage was legalized by the Supreme Court. So I'm wondering, what your thoughts are on the representativeness of these couples as being representative of same-gender couples, and how do you think you might reach the everyday same-gender couples that aren't connected to LGBT resources because they don't feel like they need to be, or they have been out for a long time, so that was maybe they were really involved in the LGBT community earlier in their life, but now.
Yeah, excellent question. I think that we learn, and I don't want to speak for Casey, but at least in our conversations, that we learned a lot in terms of not necessarily going immediately to those target-focused, community outreach organizations. And at least now, with the funding that we have, is looking at more Facebook groups that are, and we've done a lot of Facebook recruiting, which has been certainly more successful for this study, of just general organizations that are open. We've actually looked at also, we've done some recruitment through faith organizations that are LGBTQIA accepting, and trying to think outside the box, so to speak. I agree though, 100%, is that not everyone is going to be utilizing some resources. And so even then, when we're seeing these potentially marginal effects with support, is that yeah, my partner's one aspect, however, I may be getting support, with these situations all the time.
Do you use Enter?
We do.
We use Enter in other research, and then like in the big studies that are cited, they say that there is more accessibility in terms of overall population access, sometimes lower income, sometimes more rural areas. Because the idea is, assuming that you sign up to be an Amazon Enter worker and you get paid, maybe you're doing that, for those reasons. Maybe you need that money, or you're more rural, or you're, at a job that doesn't offer benefits where you need that extra cash. So supposedly it's supposed to be more representative according to the highly cited papers.
Do you know how would we do it dyadically?
I don't know. You could ask.
Okay.
We could ask Sabrina Helm. She's
Okay.
much more. Do other folks know more about
I
Enter?
did dyadic.
Did you?
In undergrad, yeah. You basically give them an individualized link when they're done that gives it, they provide their partners and they get an individualized survey.
And then the other nice thing about Enter, and Savannah probably knows this too. So you only have to. This sounds terrible, but you pay folks only about $2. So like, say that you want to like test a measure or get like a kind of a news sample, then you could just get like hundreds, if not thousands, of people in a couple of days. But then to actually then do the reach out, you'd have to then pay them much more, like
We
$20,
pay,
$30.
I think, it doesn't say on the flyer, I think we pay $36.
So potentially, I mean, I don't know how effective that would be with, same-sex, same-gender couples, but we got like a sample of like 500 parents in like 3 days. But one person, we didn't do dyadic or family.
Another challenge, not speaking of the challenge, I mean, it's been a very rewarding and I think learning, it's a really good learning experience, is that one of the things that we were mindful of in doing this is that we thought, let's use the back depression inventory in terms of a reliable measure for screening. Now, one of the items in the back depression inventory is, have you thought about suicidal?
Yeah.
Right, like suicide, yeah, I mean, at least it's around suicidal ideation, I'm missing the step. And so immediately, we have to go into kind of triage mode when our participants actually acknowledge that. So if they do acknowledge that, we also had to add an additional step within our protocol. Fortunately, fortunately, it's only been a few times that we have had to implement that protocol of calling, emailing the participant, saying, can you please respond to this, letting us know that you're okay, here are your community resources. Only one time that we've had to actually then call the local authorities. By the time that the local authorities actually were on the way, the participant had contacted us. However, prior to that, in terms of our screening information, we say, can you please provide your full name and mailing address? Well, I mean, we've screened easily over, I'm making this up at this point, but at least it's a long, I have to scroll a lot on my Excel sheet. So it's, probably easy close to 500 couples. However, how many couples are willing to then provide their mailing address in their physical location, not necessarily, knowing that it's, certainly going to be protected. And for those of you that are in the research phases, right, it's clinical populations, it's very important work. However, a lot of the nuances that I don't think that
Great talk, very interesting, thank you. And if you covered this already, I apologize if I missed it, but you moved in the direction of looking further into female couples. But did you detect a difference between the male couples and the female couples in order to move in that direction?
excellent question. So two parts. So one, on some of the associations that we found in some of the other papers that I didn't present here were on differences in terms of stress spillover and the associations between stress spillover more for same-gendered male couples. However, truly the impetus for the grant was that it was a medical grant that was focused on no population differences, I mentioned. So we didn't see any differences in terms of location.
Yeah, nice talk. You pass.
Oh, yeah. All right, I was worried.
No, but a clarification question. When you were talking about the recruiting for the chronic pain, did you say that you were getting people where both partners had it and therefore were excluded? Wow. Too bad you couldn't have done that and had...
Yeah, no kidding, broadened it to
Yeah.
those people.
That would have been super interesting.
Yeah, and I think that like in talking, and I agree, we still have the recruitment information, you know.
Maybe, yeah, next time around.
Absolutely. And I think we're similarly seeing that with the depression as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so, you know, I mean, there may be like right on the cusp, however, we at least, you know, request moderate to severe and then deep no symptoms.
Oh.
I would actually be surprised, given data that we're collecting, if you would find any sexual minority person right now in our country that doesn't have
Something.
moderate
Boy.
levels of depression.
Yeah, fair enough.
Very good.
Yeah. And then if you consider chronic pain as somatic, you know what I mean. So, thank you. That can be just another manifestation of all of that negativity out there. So.
Yes, was that because you wanted to be able to distinguish who was the patient, who was the partner? Is that why you only wanted the one person to have a diagnosis, or like what was?
Yes, the thought was it wasn't from like a data analytic perspective.
Okay.
It was more so from a perspective of dyadic management.
I see.
Is that how does one partner in this context provide care to their partner, and then more so if you're in a relationship with someone who is exhibiting some type of clinical symptoms, how does that affect you? Yeah, individually in relation.
Were there age restrictions on the population? Because I'm thinking you got a lot of them if you were looking at older couples.
Over 18.
Just, so it included older
Correct.
couples. So that's what I see.
Correct. Yeah, and we connected up. I have some contacts at the Phoenix VA, and so reached out. But again, it was similar to the parents' experiencing.
Obviously, that's the next population to study.
There you go.
I had another question about the regional differences. How representative is Alabama sample? I mean, Birmingham, if you're in that area,
Yeah, let
and
me
you
go back to
don't
the.
hardly have any African American couples, I can't.
And that's actually, that's a very good question. And actually something that came up when we were presenting this at NCFR is talking about, like, again, how representative is your sample, even given your, if you're looking at even two distinct areas. And so the question actually came up is that, well, great, you're targeting some of these resources. Well, have you thought about additional resources for individuals with, potentially intersecting identities, whether it be race and ethnicity or socioeconomic status, and so broadening, our thought in that respect. Good question.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks everyone for all of your great questions and for your presentation. And go ahead and give a round of applause. And Melissa, is there?
Oh yeah, so I think I actually drove all the way